And with the 25th pick, the Houston Texans select
nobody, baby. Nick, what's going on?
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Battle Red Nation, welcome to this Friday episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And some of y'all may not be happy with your team today. Some of y'all may be excited and ecstatic for the weekend, day 2 and day 3 of the draft for your team today. But regardless, we are here to talk Texans. I'm John Hickman. That is Brian Big Stars Barfield. We are your credentialed media members, and we are excited for today's show. On today's episode, we will talk about our thoughts on the draft before the weekend. You guys want to stick around for that because one of the better questions that was asked to Nick Caserio on Thursday night from Big Sarge, you want to stick around for that. What's next? Jonathan Alexander had an opportunity to ask Nick Caserio about picking at 25 compared to picking at 34. If there's a player available that they really like at 25, you want to stick around for that as well. We kick off today's show looking at who was the 25th pick. The Texans select absolutely nobody. Was that the right decision? Was that the right move? Was that the smart move? We'll dive into that. But today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions apply. Big Sarge.
greetings and salutations, John Hickman.
I feel bad for you guys that was at the NRG stadium last night that, was anticipating the Houston Texans making a first-round pick, something that they haven't done in 2 years now due to trading out. But I feel bad for the fans that went to all of these draft parties. And I was at one last night at Dave & Buster's and didn't get an opportunity to see their team pick a first-round draft pick. And so a lot to be sad about, but I also think there is a lot to be excited for. Let's hear from Nick Caserio and his thoughts on, just what happened last night altogether.
Trying to get everybody to smile, so I'll just put it here next to me, so I don't look like a total moron. So that one microphone. All right, how's everybody doing? Yeah, we're in a good spot. Feel really good about where we are. We went into the day, I'd say, honestly, we had 3 different scenarios. Trade up, stay at 25 and pick, trade back. I mean, D'Amico and I have been talking about it basically for 2-3 days. Here are some different scenarios. Here are some possibilities. I don't want to say we talked to the whole league, but we probably talked to the whole league on every different level. So, there are some players that we identified, some were out of reach. Some, in the end, trades are a byproduct of teams willing to make a decision to move or not. So, we fell at 25. That was the best thing for us. Puts us in a pretty good spot. 2 2s, 3 3s, picked up another 3 next year. We'll deal with tomorrow. We think we're going to get some pretty good football players tomorrow. We felt like the value to draft was basically in the middle. So we'll try to take advantage of our opportunities here tomorrow. Put ourselves in a pretty good position next year as well. 1, 2 2s, 2 3s, 2 4s. So, we've always talked about just creating as much flexibility and optionality for us as possible, and that's where we are. So, there's 2 more days of the draft that are left. We'll see how these next few days go. I'll try to, make good, smart decisions tomorrow. Trust our process, trust our evaluations. And then once we get through the draft, kind of flip the page and kind of go to the next phase. So we're going to get good football players. D'Amico and I feel really good about tomorrow. We'll kind of see what happens.
Big Stars, that was Nick Caserio's opener. He tried to kick it off with a little bit of lighthearted joke. I don't know if you guys smiled or not, right? He had the draft hats, but no player. Your thoughts on what happened last night, Sarge?
So I will say this, John. As I'm sitting there in the midst of it, when I seen that they were going to trade back, well, first of all, no. Fans, viewers, and listeners, let me tell you this. I've been saying on this show repeatedly, hey, man, this is a top-heavy, talented draft. if you want a player that's going to fit the needs, whether it be on the offensive line or wide receiver, you're going to have to jump up to get that player. You're going to have to trade up. So, John, as I'm sitting there and I'm watching, here's one player that the Texans that feel like would have been a day one starter for the Texans off the board.
Yeah.
Another player and another player and another player and another player. And when the Green Bay Packers took Matthew Golden at number 23, I said, oh, I don't think that the Houston Texans are going to draft anybody.
Can I add something to that point?
Oh, for sure. Come on.
And when Nick Caserio mentioned that there were players out of reach, I think the Saints in Dallas threw a wrench in the Texans' plans. More so the Cowboys drafting Booker that high at 12, a player that we know Houston really liked. And from there, that put Houston in pivot mode, I believe. The best decision for them was to trade back. If Matthew Golden was available there at 25, I think that they would have taken him. But I also don't know how much value they placed in Golden, more so value placed in Tyler Booker. Houston made a trade before the draft kicked off with Cleveland to get 3 picks, 2, 6, and the 7th. And with the Giants, we know they traded back with and got this year's 99th pick and a 2026 third rounder. But I think Booker is where, for Houston, it kind of was like that price was too high to trade up with Dallas, and we're not going to jeopardize ourselves on the back end of the draft.
And I can understand that, John. I can understand that may have been because Matthew Golden was slated to go to the Dallas Cowboys at number 12. He had been mocked there by everybody. And so maybe the Houston Texans thought that they were going to be able to get Tyler Booker. And maybe they were prepared. Maybe they were prepared to trade up because Nick did tell us that he was taking a lot of, there was a lot of trade talking during the draft. So I will say this, John. When I started to see some of the talent come off the board, I say I don't feel like the Houston Texans are going to pick anybody. And if they do, they would have traded up. I said maybe they could have got Donovan Jackson. Maybe they would have, took Connerly, and even thinking that maybe they could get Simmons in the second round. So they said, well, let us trade back and let us get some draft capital. So I'm saying to myself, I'm looking at the draft and I'm saying, yeah, they're not going to take anybody. It just was starting to line up that way because all of the good talent was coming off the board. And I'm saying, oh, so now they're in project mode. Hey, we're going to draft this player. He may not, play a lot this year, but in year 2 or year 3, he'll be a starter for us.
Ooh.
As I'm listening to this clip, though, John, because listening to Nick talk, in the beginning, you're still trying to get over the initial shock. But as I heard him again, John, you know what I heard? Hey, we got a lot of, draft picks, this year. We got a lot of draft picks next year. We're going to have a lot of rookies that we're going to have on our team. So, yeah, because we got to pay Will and we got to pay CJ. So if we can get all these players on a rookie contract, we can bring in some more talent that we're going to be able to develop when we're going to be cash strapped because Nico is going to be rolling around for an extension here pretty soon. And then are you going to keep, by the time we can develop this talent, maybe we'll be able to have everything set in place because now we got to pay Kamari and we're going to have to pay Kalen. So one of the things that, like I said, one of the things that I heard, John, was, hey, we got to get rookie contracts because we got to spend a lot of money coming up here pretty soon. That's not what a fan wants to hear. That's not
the reality.
Yeah, but that is definitely the reality. And I still feel, John, that you acquired these draft picks. I felt like they still should have taken a player in the first round, but now I understand more hearing Nick again.
And when you look at what Houston got back for the next 2 years, they got 2 second rounders this year, 2 third rounders, 3 third rounders this year, gave themselves some flexibility on the back end of the draft between 6th and 7th round. They have 5 total picks. And then in 2026, 2 2s, 2 3s, 2 4s. And we look at, I can't wait to ask you, your question about trading up, trading for a player when we close out today's show. But overall for Houston, I think the price of fame, and in this case, the price of a player that is an impact starter was just too high for Houston. They did not want to cause themselves harm on the back end of this year or next year's draft, because to your point, they got guys that are going to command some massive contracts.
Yeah.
Now, with that being said, you are looking at some of the premier players off the board. You are looking at some of those guys that, without a question, barring any injury, has a higher chance in some cases to be a little bit more successful due to the talent. And those guys will be able to give you a fifth-year option, which will still give you that flexibility when you have a first rounder. So for me, I kind of wonder, moving forward, okay, hey, what is the plan for Houston? So we'll dive into that next. What's next for the Houston Texans? They pick at 34 later this evening on day 2, right? They'll kick off the draft with the second pick. I'm just very curious to see what that first pick will be. Will it be on the offensive side of the ball? Because I am not sold that they won't go defense.
And one more thing, John, before we go into the break, I will say this though. For as much as I said, I am going to go back to what I had said previously and earlier. I still think that they should have drafted somebody. I still feel like that they should have gotten a player. Like I said, I'm starting to understand more, but I still feel like they dropped the ball on getting either offensive lineman or a wide receiver, somebody that they needed to have on this team.
When we come back, we will talk about what's next for the Houston Texans as they get ready to pick at pick number 34.
As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means it's time to hire. You need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs come in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. Post your job on LinkedIn's new feature, and it can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Was a pick that you all might have picked, is it still on the board?
Good question. Actually, one of the players that we were talking about is actually still on the board. Yeah, so it's a good question. So whether or not we actually pick the player, we'll see if that actually happens. So.
Welcome back to the Friday's edition of the Locked On Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. John?
You got to love Nick, man.
Hey,
you got to love him. You got to love the unpredictability of Nick Caserio.
A special shout out to our friend of the show, beat writer for the Houston Chronicle, John M. Alexander, who wrote a great article on Nick Caserio, by the way. John, could you tell that Jonathan caught him off guard with that question? I don't think that Nick was prepared for that question. But
Nick
I'm gonna
always
ask
prepares for everything, but I thought that question was like, you got the gall to ask me that question right now after I didn't pick it off?
Right. And so, John, I'm going to ask you the same question that Jonathan asked Nick Caserio. Do you think that the player that they wanted is still on the board? Or do you think that Nick is just giving us lip service and saying, yeah, because there's still plenty of guys left in the draft. So, no, those guys that were gone, we had them on the board, but that's not the player we really wanted.
That's hard to tell, man. When I look at the last couple of years for Houston, I look at we go back to last year, Kamari Lassiter, Kalen Bullock, Cade Stover. All three of those guys had visits with the Houston Texans. And so when I look at some of the top 30 visits for Houston this year, virtual visits for Houston this year, combine visits for Houston this year, the guys that stand out to me that could have been in play for Houston at 25, defensive tackle TJ Sanders, offensive tackle Charles Grant out of William and Mary. And so I look at those two names and I think to myself, okay, where did they have Charles Grant ranked on their draft board? He was a top 30 visit player for the Houston Texans. Sanders was a top 30 visit player for the Houston Texans. They have shown consistency in, at least for the past couple of seasons. We bring a lot of these guys in. A lot of times we're going to draft a couple of these guys. Will Anderson and CJ Stroud, top 30 visits, right? And they traded up for it, Will Anderson. So for me, I think that's where you look at Houston and say to yourself, those two may be the guys that Nick Caserio could be referring to, but it could also be smoke. It could also be something where he just needed to respond to that question to move on. I'm not sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw either of those guys in Texans jerseys.
John, you ever heard that old saying, talking out of both sides of your mouth?
Absolutely. I'm from the
That's
South.
exactly what Nick Caserio is doing. And I've been around Nick Caserio long enough to know. And like I said, the question caught him off guard. And so he's always prepared for everything. But that's why when you said, he was like, well, that's a good question. Because I know that he was probably thinking, no, there were some players that we really wanted that left early in the draft. And, to his credit, I will say, to him and D'Amico's credit, they're not going to give up the house for players that high, right? No. The only like when you look at giving up the house, you give up the house for a player like Will Anderson Jr., which they did. Hey, look, we want this guy. We know what this guy can do. I don't see a Will Anderson Jr. in this draft at all. I don't see any other players that are Will Anderson Jr. that would make the Texans want to give up as much as they did to get Will Anderson, and it was well deserved. And so I will say that. But when I look at Nick saying, yeah, there's still a player, I think that's more lip service, because there is a lot of players still left in this draft. There's a lot of players left in this draft, John, that could help the Houston Texans later on. And the one thing that I do believe is that when you look at Nick Caserio's track record, when you look at D'Amico Ryan's track record, I do believe that they can draft players that can contribute to this team. And maybe they've seen something, or maybe they have the data on another offensive lineman or a wide receiver that they could take. I mean, Luther Burden is still out there. They still may be able to get Isaiah Bond, who is still out there. They may say, hey, there's something that we could do with these players. And now you also wonder, John, if how much Nick Cayley is saying, hey, look, we don't have to jump up to get these guys. We don't have to jump up to get these guys. The system that I want to put in play, we can use these second and third round guys.
Absolutely. And when you look at the flexibility that Houston was able to create for themselves, 2 2s, 3 3s, and I think that's where it gets the possibility of it getting special for Houston, whether that be drafting players, whether that be taking 2 of those 2s and trading up for a player on the back end of that second round to give themselves 3 2s, or whether that be moving off of one of those 3s for next year. Sarge will dive into that maybe for a potential player. Houston, they're in a position right now where I think they can't lose. I think that they lost the first round. They should have picked a player, in my opinion, in your opinion, so we can agree on that. But moving forward, going from 8 picks to 10 picks, giving yourself a couple of 7s, a couple of 6s, that gives Houston the flexibility to move around the draft, not only for this year for a player that they want to draft, but also next year and for a player around the NFL that's already on another team. But when I look at what's next for the draft, for me, Sarge, go get the protection, go get the weapon.
Yeah.
I don't want to see a defensive player. I think when you look at those additional 3rd-round picks, 6th-round picks, that's where for Houston that creates their flexibility to move around to go get you a defensive player. But for Houston, again, all of the issues were on the offensive side of the ball last year. What were the issues? Protecting CJ Stroud, right? You started phase 1 of getting a new offensive line coach, and also the presumed offense you'll run playing in the strengths of who you already have on the roster. but you need to go get an anchor for your offensive line down the road, and also getting a weapon. When Nico Collins was down for 5 games, the offense struggled. When Stephon Diggs went down, the offense struggled some more. When Tank Dell went down, the offense struggled some more. Go get weapons to allow your offense to be a little bit more freer, and also just give CJ the opportunity to play point guard and pick and choose his poison.
It's starting to make sense, John. It's
Is it another
starting to
player
make sense.
on another team?
No, because I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you. In the back of my mind, even though they pick at number 34 on Friday, which is the 4 picks into the second round, I'm feeling like, because there's still some players on the board that I feel like other teams want. Nick may make another trade. Nick may move back in the second round and gain more draft capital. He may be able to pick up some more draft picks. I don't know when it comes to Nick, but John, it finally makes sense now. Remember what the Houston Texans have been saying. Remember what Nick has been saying. Remember what D'Amico has been saying. Hey, we don't draft for need. We draft best player available. Maybe they already had it in their mind. We're going to draft the best player available starting in the second round and in the third round and so forth and so on. So maybe like they didn't lie to us. You know what I'm saying? They just did that semantically speaking. Hey, we don't draft for need. We're drafting best player available, because now once the second round starts, you're drafting best player available, right? And don't get me wrong, there's still going to be some talent, not that top level talent that I feel, but there's going to be some talent in the second and the third rounds, and there's going to be some guys that are going to get in the later on the Saturday that they're going to develop, and you're going to be like, wow, where did this guy come from? But they are now drafting, John, best player available and not need.
Technically, the best player available right now would be cornerback Will Johnson.
Now, hold on. Right there. Out of Michigan, right?
Out of Michigan.
So here's the thing, John. He slipped out of the first round. That's why I'm saying at 34, Nick is still in the prime position to make some deals to gain more draft capital, move back a little bit, and because there's somebody that's going to try to jump up to get him. That's how I feel.
Will Johnson missed 7 games in 2024, and when I look at the rest of the best player available, according to ESPN, it isn't an offensive player until running back Travion Henderson.
They got Luther Burden in the third round?
No, he's just not the best player available. Right now, when I look at the best player available list, this is based off ESPN. Jaden Higgins is over Luther Burden.
Yeah.
Trey Harris is over Luther Burden. Tight end Mason Taylor is over Luther Burden. D tackle Shamar Turner. Like, this is where we got to look at, we talk about the influence of Nick Caserio? Where does the influence of D'Amico Ryans come in and say, hey, man, we just saw what Philly did. Y'all know my defense is already like that. If you let me get another one. So I wouldn't be shocked if they go defensive player at 34. I wouldn't be shocked if they go with the number 34 overall pick, if they go Darius Alexander. I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked. I'm not shocked at anything no more. And honestly, Sarge, I also wouldn't be shocked if the Houston Texans would now, the draft capital that they have, 3/3, 2 seconds, picks for next year, if they use and leverage those picks to do what? Hey, Detroit. Hey, Detroit. Hey, Philly.
Hey, John. Picks. And real quickly, during the press conference last night, he said, hey, we got Henry To'oTo'o in the 5th round, and look what he was able to do. Nobody had that on the board. And then this is where it gets interesting. I know we got to go to the break. This is where it gets interesting, John. Come closer. Come closer. He said, we also got Xavier Hutchinson in the later rounds. And I'm saying to myself, maybe they won't draft a wide receiver. Maybe they're just going to stick with what they got.
That would be a huge mistake. But what I will say is, Sarge, you asked one of the better questions of the night. So let's dive into that on the other side. And Locked On Texans fans and listeners, this is the perfect opportunity to let you guys know that the Rockets play Game 3 tomorrow. And if you want to feel that Rockets energy, you can't do it at the Toyota Center, but you can do it with FanDuel, right? The NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action right now. When you join FanDuel, place a $5 bet, and you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins, right? I love how FanDuel is making betting easy, whether it's picking your favorite team or diving into player props. Jalen Green threes. He went crazy last game. Will he continue that trend? He also had a couple of steals to go along with that. So you're looking at Jalen Green as a hot player. Al P rebounds, right? Or will Steph Curry go crazy and take the lead? Whatever you want to get into, FanDuel has so many ways to bet on your favorite player props, points, threes, steals, rebounds, blocks, whatever it is, FanDuel has it. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same game parlay for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today.
Some of those assets that you built up as far as like with the trades and the assets that you got from the trades, could that also be used later on to maybe trade with a team for another player?
Sure. Look, and I've said this, you guys have heard me say this, the draft's a draft. It's not the only team building opportunity. So we get through the draft. There's a heightened sense of awareness, and there's a lot of hype, and everybody loves the draft. I love the draft. I'm not trying to minimize the draft, but okay, it's just one fixed point. Once you get through the draft, it's April. May, June, July, August, September, through the season, there's opportunities. And then part of it is understanding the league, understanding as many players as possible. And if there's an opportunity for us where you can use a third-round pick next year or use a 2 to acquire a player that you feel makes sense. Now, there's a financial component as well. You know, the contract has to fit and all those types of things. So we look at everything. Like, we're never going to eliminate one thing or never going to be so fixated like a lot of people are on one particular aspect of team building. So that's just not how you build a team. So other sports approach it the same way. Look at, I mean, honestly, like how many first-round picks does the Oklahoma City Thunder have? Like 400? So, and they got a pretty good team. So, I mean, nobody thought probably when Sam was moving all those picks. So, I mean, you look around, like there's no one-size-fits-all model. So we just try to use our information, try to make good decisions. D'Amico and I talk continuously, regularly. I mean, he's sick of probably seeing my face. That's okay. That's why he wants me to put this hat on. So, but like we're both excited about where we are, even though we didn't pick tonight. Like he and I have as much energy tonight as we did going into the draft, and we're excited for the opportunity tomorrow. Get some rest, kind of recalibrate, see what our options are, and be ready to go tomorrow afternoon.
That was Big Sarge with a great question about, maybe trading with other teams around the NFL with the draft capital that the Houston Texans have. Sarge, we've been flirting with that idea here on the show, right? We had the whole J-Mo in Houston conversation. When you look around the NFL, I'm sure that there's playmakers on the outside, playmakers on the line, playmakers on the offensive side of the ball that Houston really feel like they could benefit from. But I also think that was a great question because the reality is between this year and next year, the Houston Texans, like this year, we know that they have 10 picks, right? Two second rounders, 3 thirds, 79, 89, 99, 2 6s, 3 7s. Next year, 2 2s, 2 3s, 2 4s. At some point for a team that is, they got to get over the hump. It does feel like, and you've been saying it all offseason, where is the all-in or nothing move? A part of that move, I think, was C.J. Gardner-Johnson. A part of that move, I think, was Nick Caserio. But those two aren't necessarily huge splashes. Where is that huge splash? And maybe trading for a player in the NFC is the answer.
Yeah, and John, one of the reasons why I wanted to ask Nick that question was because, true, he's not lying. The Oklahoma City Thunder has acquired a bunch of talent, a bunch of young talent, and they do have a lot of picks. The Houston Rockets are the same way. The Houston Rockets have a lot of young talent, and they're constantly getting picks. I mean, this year's draft, they're going to get Phoenix's pick, and so they could potentially be picking in the top 4 again. And you're looking at a team that already has a bunch of talent. And so the reason why I preface my statement by using what he said about the Oklahoma City Thunder and with the Houston Rockets is at some point you can't just keep harboring picks. You can't just keep storing up picks. Like what are you waiting on? I mean, there isn't going to be an NFL apocalypse that blows up the league and you say, well, the only way that your Houston Texans can survive is if you have this amount of draft picks. And so you've got to be able to use that to acquire assets. And, as I was sitting there thinking, I was saying to myself, wait a minute now. And I know Nick Caserio, he is one of those guys that I feel like he doesn't feel like he's made a splash. Like last year, what do you call it, John? Is it the euphoria of what they were able to do last season and bringing in those names and, just hearing the Houston Texans name all the time because you do have you did go out and you did get a Daniil Hunter, Azeez Al-Shire. You did get a Stephon Diggs, a Joe Mixon. You know what I mean? Like that euphoria from that, it carried over into this season, but there's nothing there now. Like, well, where is it? And so I feel like Nick is going to take some of those draft picks and just like he said, hey, I'm going to team build. That's why I wanted to get it on record to say, are you done yet? Or, are you just acquiring these draft picks? And are you looking at next year's draft already? Are there going to be players that you're targeting for next year that's coming out that you're going to be able to use these picks for? Or are you saying, because you said Jameson Williams out of Detroit, correct? Right. So
yeah.
What about, there's a team that's right down the road, John, and I'm talking about you got to go out I-10 East to get to Louisiana. There's a team in New Orleans that they don't have pretty much nothing there. And what I mean by nothing is they're in a rebuild mode, but they have a really good wide receiver that could get them draft capital back. So they may be thinking, hey, we know that New Orleans is going to need some picks. Maybe maybe we can get Chris Olave on a cheap deal. So that's all I'm saying, John, is that he's got to, as time goes on, he's right. This is just a draft. You still got a whole training camp to go through. You still got the cuts to go through, and then you start the season, and then you still may be able to use those picks to trade for a player in season.
Yeah. And honestly, as we have this conversation, maybe the big splash isn't necessarily needed. They did that for an offseason and it worked out. They were able to replicate the same success that they did the prior year. And those guys that they brought in, aside from Stephon Diggs, still here. Azeez, still here. Daniil, still here, extended. Joe Mixon, traded here and was extended last offseason. So for Houston, it could be more about getting those blue-collar guys in the room to help, raise their floor of this team and raise the ceiling of this team overall to be a championship contender. I do want to add that maybe the young man from Purdue, the offensive lineman, Marcus Imbo, excuse me if I'm mispronouncing his name.
Yeah.
The offensive lineman, I think that he would be a good option for the Houston Texans simply because he can play outside. But with the Houston Texans solidifying their tackles, you still got Titus Howard. You still have Blake Fisher. They brought in Cam Robinson. They also brought in Trent Brown. For Houston, I do think their eye is on the Sparrow, and that Sparrow is a guard, which is why I go back to what I said in the first segment. The Dallas Cowboys kind of threw everything off for Houston. I do think Tyler Booker was a guy that they were ready and prepared to trade up for if he was there between picks 19 and 24. That was always a conversation for us here on the show. You don't want them to kind of overextend themselves. So maybe Marcus, a guy who can shift inside, good lower body strength, would be the guy for Houston in the second round.
Real quickly before we end this show, John, did you get a chance to see Tyler Booker's interview with the show that I think it's a Bleacher Report that Mike Parsons was on? That draft show?
I saw Michael Parsons' reaction.
Yeah, but did you hear Tyler Booker? And they asked him about how he said that he just likes to take the soul of another player. He likes to just impose his will to the point where he wants to make other players quit. John, so that's what I was just about to say. Like, that's swarm mentality. And if you had him in for he came in for a top 30 visit.
He did.
At that point, I'm saying to myself, hey, that's what we need. Look, he is what everybody wanted Laramie to be, right? And so, as far as the mentality is concerned, so if I got that type of player, you know what that means? I'm looking forward to seeing the battles between him and Daniil and him and Will. If I'm the Houston Texans, I'm saying, hey, look, hey, Nick, I want him. We need him. Let's go do whatever it is we need to do to get him. Everybody knew that he was going to be a top 10, though, John. And he went at 12, but I was like top 10, top 15.
You know what's more impressive than that interview? His walkout song was Jay-Z's Imaginary Players.
Yeah.
That's the moment for me. I would have been like, hey, let's get him in the building.
Right.
Because there ain't a lot of these young cats that know that song. So he's special. Thank y'all for watching today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, the draft edition. We'll be back over the weekend. More draft talk, more draft coverage. And I'm sure we'll be shocked by Sunday. So yeah. There'll be a move Houston makes that shocks us all. Whether it be good or bad, we'll be shocked.
Yeah, I definitely will be. I can't not wait to see what he's going to do in the second and third round.
Yeah. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Texans. Follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12.
And make sure you follow me on the app formerly known as Twitter at Big Sarge Sports with the Z at the end.
Until next time, ladies and gents, peace. Go have some fun at those draft parties tonight.